is Buddhism, as I said earlier, isn't about knowing certain things. We can easily say, I know it is important to be kind unbiasedly to the others. But from the Buddhist practitioner's perspective, you do not know it until you do not do it. That's the thing. And so even if we say, we understand loving kindness to be important, but then you have to ask yourself and say, do I do it? If you are doing it, you know it. If you are not doing it, it's as good as not knowing it at all. Someone who doesn't know it at least has an excuse. Then we are worse off. We don't even have an excuse not to do it. And therefore, Dharma is to be practiced sincerely, very accurately. Today's times, I think, as I said earlier, lots of diligence, a lot of exertion, a lot of devotion to the path of practices, but always, and not only today's times, all the times, it is a human nature in that there's so much reluctancy to actually practice the Dharma completely. Where Dharma is not completely practiced, then hoping for the result will always be ironical in many ways. And so we Buddhists always say, well, what do we hope for? Is the exhaustion of suffering for self and the others. You have to look at your own nature, your own attitude and conduct and say, well, how many are there the actions that you are doing that resemble the aspiration of finding cessation to suffering for yourself and for other sentient beings? If the actual transformation and the transition of one's own actions and conduct and attitude is not happening simply by counting, may all sufferings be exhausted, may all be enlightened, by counting it in numbers, whether through mantras or through aspirations, isn't going to be beneficial at all. And so we have this various examples of people who sort of wait for something to happen and it doesn't happen. And I always say, if you have this glass of water in front of you and I'm dying of thirst and almost at the verge of sort of dying, and I keep saying, visualizing this glass of water going into my mouth, and it will be pacifying my thirst, and so on and so forth, until I make the effort of drinking the glass of water myself. Keeping it in front of me isn't going to pacify the thirst at all. Dharma is like that. We have excellent shrines, we have excellent equipments, we have all the books, we have all our teachers, we have the pictures of our teachers, we fight over the lineages, mine is better than yours, all of these different things. They are not Dharma at all. They are entertainment in life for a temporary moment. It feels like Dharma. Genuine Dharma is not about that. Genuine Dharma is through all these different objects that allow us to reflect upon the truth, that allow us to really understand what Buddha Dharma is, the connections with the teachings and the teachers that give us an understanding of the Dharma. Now, how much of the essence of that Dharma is actually emulated in my own attitude, in my own conduct, how much of it is manifest truly, how much of it is something that is permeating within my mind stream completely, that examination, until it is done, one is not actually practicing Buddha Dharma at all. And therefore here too, being able to take the following instructions of Nagarjuna in saying, may I truly examine within my own self and see how many of those teachings have I actually heard. And those who are hearing it for the first time, then knowing these should be emulated. Many of us who have actually heard about it before, examining now and saying, oh, in all these years of my practicing the Dharma, are these the qualities that are manifest in my actions? Why is it that I'm not able to manifest? If I am manifesting it, how strong is it? Being joyful in that you are practicing it, making it more strong. And then if you've forgotten it, saying, oh, this is a reminder. This is, again, bringing your own mind back to the right track of accomplishing the practices as it should be. And in the words of our great teachers saying, if you practice the Dharma as Dharma should be practiced, it truly leads to the cessation of suffering of yourself and other sentient beings. But if Dharma itself is not practiced accurately, correctly, then Dharma itself becomes the greatest deception of all. It is very easy to let go of the faults of samsara, but it's extremely difficult to see how we have misused Dharma, and therefore that manipulation of the Dharma itself becomes a cause that is very difficult to first identify, And even if one identifies, it has become such a sort of an object of grasping that we are so attached to that it's very difficult to uproot it, very difficult to discard. So for example, attachment to worldly material things is easy to give up. Attachment to teachings and attachment to practices and attachment to lineages, those are very difficult. Very few people will be brave enough to tell you that's an attachment in the first place because you're calling it devotion, isn't it? And therefore, since these spiritual words have been brought in, so it's very difficult to recognize that they have become itself another egos, another way of manipulating your own wisdom, your own sanity. And therefore, it is very essential to give birth to the clear and honest examination within one's own self, making sure that one is truly walking the path of practice honestly. Therefore, in the beginning of the text, I think the first 6 verses of the text are devoted to emulating what are called the 6 preliminary qualities that must be there in every meditator. Kāngla thepar chawe shing sanje so jendren truk dor tempa tang jendren chima sum jepar shepa sum jesu trempa truk tempa sum. And so in Tibetan it says jesu trempa truk, or what are called 6 qualities that must be emulated by every meditators, or also called 6 things to keep in mind. And in the commentary text it says the first 4 that are explained briefly, and the latter 3 that are explained in a longer way or in a much more detailed commentary. These 6 things that should be kept in the mind of the meditator are called, as a verse it is said, Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha are the first 3 things that should be kept in the mind. Generosity is the 4th, ethical conduct is the 5th, and then following the examples is called the 6th. In some of the English translations that I remember, this is explained in various different ways. Classical Tibetan text, the commentary itself here says, if this line is translated directly as it is given, it'll read something like this. It's a very loose translation, but following the examples as well as the aspirations of the devas or the celestial beings. And very often I've seen people get a little bit confused, especially the Western students become a little bit confused over here. The way to relate to this last example, although is in the end, however, in short here as we see it is, I think very crucial. It is referring to being very honest and realistic in your approach to Dharma. What is it that you really hope to obtain from Buddha Dharma? And then knowing the fruit, working in accordance to the fruit. For example, the very simple classical example, if you want a sort of a mango fruit to grow, you plant a mango seed, isn't it? The same example here is, if you want happiness, make sure you're planting the seed of happiness. If you want emptiness, make sure you're planting the seed of emptiness. If you want enlightenment, make sure you're planting the seed of enlightenment. Don't let it be that you plant the seed of really fruit that you want is happiness. Therefore, you plant the seed of happiness, but then when it comes to a small sprouting up and your neighbor asks you, what seed did you put? You say, I put the seed of emptiness, isn't it? And that is because you're too embarrassed to say, I asked for happiness. And so you're going to pretend that this is emptiness that we want. So this is a very important example here that I think in the text is where if you are looking for relative happiness, be brave enough to say, I aspire for relative happiness. Don't pretend and say, we all want the absolute truth. But secretly, there is always the effort to gain the relative happiness. In that if you want to be very wealthy, and that's why you are praying to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, be very honest, say, I'm practicing meditation so that I can have a long life, I can find a good partner, I can actually be happy, I can have peacefulness of mind, I can be materially wealthy, and so on and so forth. it's very important that the meditator recognizes the ground that you stand upon, the potential and the sort of capacity of aspiration that your mind has, being free from guilt of thinking, oh, I have such a relative materialistic aspiration, being free of that guilt, knowing that recognizing itself allows you to make it better. Versus when you don't know what potential it is, what your actual aspiration is, and you force yourself to pretend otherwise, is a much worse situation. When we discover in our own mind that the main reason why we practice the Dharma is for our own individual happiness and freedom from suffering, yes, we've been saying all sentient beings, that's very good, but actually it is about my own self. It gives you such a direct understanding of your own mind at this moment, which is the best wisdom in your own self. And that wisdom allows you to sort of say, this is not good, make it better, and bring forward the change. And so knowing that it has always the possibility of changing, you can always let it go, develop it into further. Therefore, the guilt of discovering a lower potential and an aspiration is not necessary.